Welcome to Top Shelf Tech. I'm Jeremy Nees, and today we are very lucky to have with us Ritesh, CEO and founder of Airgap. And why are we really lucky to have Ritesh here? Because Airgap is really blowing up recently. There's a lot of interest in micro-segmentation. I've done a couple of short videos on it and actually got quite a lot of interest and response. It's sort of very quickly shot around the globe via LinkedIn and the like. So Airgaps definitely caught people's attention. So we're extremely lucky to have Ritesh with us here today. Ritesh, do you want to just start by introducing yourself and a little bit of your background?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity, Jeremy. Always a pleasure to speak to you. My name is Ritesh Agrawal. I used to be formerly the CEO and founder of Airgap Networks Incorporated, that has been acquired by Zscaler, and along with that, I'm now part of Zscaler. Prior to starting Airgap, I used to run Juniper network security business, about $400 million in revenue, serving large number of clients. And I had the opportunity to speak to probably 1,000+ customers during my tenure and got to understand deeply as to the problems that they care about and the solution that they're looking for. So that served a good foundation for me to start thinking about Airgap and eventually build Airgap. And then I also was privileged to run Juniper's, sort of be part of Juniper's routing team as well as switching team. So got a fair bit of understanding on networking across routing, switching, and of course security or network security as such.
Awesome, thanks for that. And look, Ritesh, we were introduced through a mutual friend last year, and this bit before the Zscaler acquisition. And I'd have to say I'd come across the Airgap solution before. I'd been looking at micro-segmentation solutions, and I think my observation with micro-segmentation is there are lots of different options in various forms, right? Within cloud service providers, public cloud service providers, they have some native micro-segmentation capability. There's agent-based solutions. There's solutions that are built around updating rules in your current layer 3 firewalls. And I think the solution isn't just about micro-segmentation. It's about micro-segmentation done on scale in a form that's manageable. And when I looked at the Airgap website the first time, I thought, I saw that it was agentless, and I thought, how does that work? And I kind of I put it to one side, and it wasn't until we had that introduction that we had a discussion. You explained to me how it worked. I was actually struck with kind of how simple and elegant it was, that you'd used all these things that are already built into the networking stack, but then to make such a kind of big, challenging scale problem easy, relatively simple. So do you want to just talk to us a little bit about the solution and I guess how you've come at this versus, there are other options, of course, in market, but how Airgap and how you've come at this solution?
Absolutely. I'll start with a funny anecdote. When we got invested first by one of the very smart and very talented, well-respected VC in the Valley, he's been doing investment in network and network security space for nearly 2+ decades. And I distinctively remember speaking to him as the first meeting post investment. And here is what he says: Ritesh, I've been doing it for 23 years. One thing that I have to tell all my founders is to make their story simple. But he said, this is the first time I'm meeting a founder that I have to tell him, make your story a little bit more complex because it's just too simple. So yes, the solution is pretty elegant. You talked about there are various options that our customers have when it comes to micro-segmentation. And I saw that there are some challenges with almost all of the available options. And this is going back to my sort of conversations with thousands of customers during my tenure at Juniper. I understood, number one, the fundamental problem or big white space in the industry is really the lateral threat movement. One infected device, and it applies to every facet of our network, so to speak. So it could be data center, it could be cloud, it could be corporate offices, factories, hospitals, airports, anything where one infected device has the potential to infect other devices. So the result is enterprises guard their network really, really hard because they want to make sure that the threat doesn't come into their network, because everybody knows that once that happens, then it's game over. We all know that with the hybrid workforce and COVID and other things, people are shuttling back and forth, and they can bring a USB stick or take the laptop home, connect to a network that is not familiar to them or a USB stick, and then voila, it's game over. The solutions that are available today fall into, broadly speaking, three categories. One is the agent based solution, like you mentioned, where each of the hosts needs to be installed with an agent. It's possible to install agents into some of the devices. I mean, the industry average is about 20% of the devices are managed, and about 80% of the devices are not managed.
Yep.
So even if it is agentable, so to speak, these could be a regulated machine in a healthcare environment, where you touch the machine and you're out of compliance, so to speak. Could be a factory with a black box machine, you don't even know what kind of operating system it has, or a vintage operating system running Windows 95, Windows XP, Windows 2007. You dare not touch it because nobody's going to support you because Microsoft has already backed out and so on and so forth. So I think agent-based solutions have their own pros and cons. I think the biggest challenge is it doesn't cover 100% of your footprint, which is absolutely necessary. The second tier of solutions I see is sort of the hypervisor or infrastructure operating system based. So Cisco ACI or VMware NSX, they fall into the same bucket where you don't have 100% footprint coverage. And these are very heavyweight technologies. So, and the third one, which is probably the worst of all, is the ACLs. So switch ACL, I'm going to manipulate the ACLs into switches. Now, first of all, you're dating yourself back to 30 years. I think most of the people who have gray hair may understand ACL. And if you don't have gray hair, you probably don't even know what ACL means. So we start from there where you need to educate the whole environment. Plus, ACLs don't scale. Switch has TCAM limitations, so you can have, depending on the vendor you have chosen, 2,000 or 3,000 ACLs. They're nearly not sufficient. I mean, just writing a single DNS security policy for 3,000 devices in my office would consume 100% of my ACLs. I would
Yep.
have nothing left. So if I have to write any other security policy, game over. So there are companies that either directly manipulate the ACL or they manipulate ACL through a NAC solution. In the end, they suffer from the same limitation, which is the scale. Plus, ACLs dynamically change the switch state. So no networking person with his or her weight equivalent to a salt would agree to that dynamic changes of the switch state. I tried to do this at Juniper. Unfortunately, it didn't become massively successful for the same reason. There would be a huge objection from the networking team to keep manipulating the ACLs and the switches. Coming back to air gap. So air gap is the fourth category, if I may. Um,
Yep.
is we got heavily inspired by telco mobile carrier. At Juniper, I used to sell about 50% of my business came from telco mobile carrier at that time. It was 6, 7 years ago. Things may have changed now for Juniper. And telcos, I mean, my puzzle was how do these telcos keep their network very secure? Because Android arguably is the most vulnerable operating system on the planet. I would say majority, not all, but majority of the Android users are probably not security savvy. And significant portion of the Android population is buying this service in some parts of the world for $2 a month, unlimited text, data, voice, whatever. How can anybody afford expensive security solution to protect these millions of Android devices hanging off of a telco service provider network, which incidentally is built with the same router, switch, and firewall that enterprises buy? I sold it to them, so there's no argument there. So my puzzle was extremely vulnerable operating system managed by rather security not savvy users. Um, and telcos providers, I talked to them, they spend $0 on security. So no security spent and never been breached. We've never heard about all of the subscribers of AT&T, Vodafone, Deutsche Telekom, you name it, got breached because one of the devices downloaded a malware on it. And so that was the puzzle. It turns out that telco subscriber network has figured out zero trust before any of us even knew the term zero trust. And the way they did that was they put every device in a network of one. So each of your cell phone or a tablet that you have, whether it's Android or iOS or Windows or whatever, would be in a network, separate network. And then at the central level, service providers has the authority or the ability to write policies to say, okay, which device can talk to which device. In case of a telco subscriber network, they blanket put a policy that no two devices can talk to each other at the network level. So you and I could be sitting in a coffee shop connected to AT&T network. I cannot telnet into your phone or SSH or FTP into your phone. I can obviously WhatsApp you, Slack you, or FaceTime you, but that's at the application level, not at the network level, which is where the threats propagate typically. So I got pretty inspired by that technology. And then as I started scratching the surface, I figured that this is the same technology used by cloud builders. So that's why you've never heard about a Pepsi VM compromising a Coke VM,
Yep. Yep.
because it's put in separate network, logically speaking. So I had enough proof that this is a scalable technology, it's a proven technology. We all have been using it. Now the challenge was, how do I bring it to the
Yeah,
enterprises?
and that's a great point, right? Because telco, you don't need stuff to talk to each other, whereas enterprise, you do. And I've told you the story in the past. I think where it was probably call it 5 years ago, but there's a fairly major breach of a organization where a threat got in, very traditional server network, lateral movement. All of a sudden, every VM's kind of infected, and everything ends up being brought back from backup across weeks or months. So huge impact. And I saw one of the recommendation papers around the remediation of that, and it was right. You've had these large, flat networks, call them /16s or whatever. You should go down to /24s. So we're going from thousands of hosts down to still hundreds of hosts. So it doesn't really solve the problem. But the challenge in getting there was still having to re-IP everything, re-subnet everything, build a firewall rule set for all these things that you didn't need to worry about. And you'd only incrementally move the dial. Like you hadn't made a big difference. And it was too hard. It was simply too hard to go from, a large private sort of class B down to a class C sort of size network. But your solution, it's not for consumer network. So it's got to work in an enterprise, right? So how have you achieved that in terms of we can get there, and we can get there in a good period of time without sort of taking 2 years to re-IP and build a firewall rule set?
It's funny you mention it, because my previous employer and my co-founder's previous employer, they both went through the exercise of re-IPing the entire network. So they both were at /20 or /16, I forget now.
Yep.
And then the red team exercise happened. I think Verizon or somebody else did it. And they said the biggest problem you have is you have a flat network with lots of devices, and you're vulnerable as a result. It took anywhere from 6 months to 18 months, depending on the organization, and millions of dollars in spending, with sort of resources that you're required to make that happen. Many of our customers don't have that luxury. They don't have millions of dollars. They cannot afford a downtime re-IP. We are serving critical infrastructure like manufacturing, healthcare, transportation. Airports are starting to deploy Airgap. They can't afford downtime even for a minute, let alone for days or weeks. And they don't want to invest millions of dollars just to cut over. So the way Airgap handles this is, first of all, if you do Airgap transition, we guarantee that not a single session would be lost, let alone downtime or anything. It's pretty smooth, and it cuts over, and you maintain your sessions still. So for critical infrastructure that is extremely sensitive to downtimes, Airgap is the easiest transition. No IP address changes are required. No firewall rules are required to change. Your routing, everything else remains the same. The way we achieve that is, and I'll explain it simply, with DHCP packets, we have similar solution for static. But the way we do that is we act as a DHCP proxy. So in your switch, let's say you have 100 VLANs that you want to cut over to Airgap, you'll start with one at a time. You'd pick one VLAN and say, I want to cut it over. So all we ask you to do is make us the DHCP helper for that particular VLAN. And as we start seeing DHCP packets and the responses, because we act like a proxy, we change the net mask to be all ones. And we actually ask you to shut down your SVI, so we become the default gateway. So now imagine in a DHCP fleet, and where I'm sitting right now at Zscaler headquarters, we've been deployed. Airgap has been deployed since June of last year. So I am air-gapped already. But I don't know. I don't even realize. I open my laptop like I always do. DHCP packet goes through. If I show you my IP config or if config information, it would be /32 IP address for me. But so the net mask will be /32, but the IP address is the same that I would have gotten regardless, because we don't mess with your DHCP server or anything. So DHCP server doesn't even know that somebody is manipulating the net mask to /32. Now my device, my laptop in this case, is sending the traffic to Airgap appliance that is deployed here at Zscaler campus. And Zscaler has put east-west policy control for this. So I cannot RDP into my colleague's laptop, or a virus or malware on my laptop cannot RDP into my colleague's laptop.
So then if we talk about the default gateway, the default gateway, now my understanding is you can either use the Airgap appliance as the default gateway, or you can leave that blank and your machine will ARP for the default gateway, and then you can respond at a switch level. Is that accurate?
No, we actually recommend that we be the default gateway, because once we are the default gateway, we see both east-west and north-south traffic, all of it. The beauty is Airgap plus Zscaler are so complementary. So north-south traffic, the traffic going towards the internet, we can tag it appropriately because we're sitting at L2 level. So we can see MAC address, we can see all of the details. We do profiling of the device. So we can now start sending to Zscaler ZIA, hey, I'm seeing this TV or this printer or this camera, and it's tagged appropriately. Now you can write much fancier and more powerful policies in Zscaler ZIA, where now Zscaler has the advantage of getting down to your IoT, OT devices and understanding what kind of device. This is a Samsung camera. Maybe it needs to go to Samsung.com, but it doesn't need to go to LG.com and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so it's really complementary, isn't it? In terms of, Zscaler's always done very well in that north-south space, and the east-west space, in a lot of ways, hasn't changed for decades, right? And this is kind of, the term zero trust firewall gets used a bit, but I do think that's a pretty apt description around. It's sort of, if you've gone from your classic firewalls, your ACLs, you've had your next-gen firewalls. This is almost a whole new category and approach to that east-west traffic segmentation problem, I think. And that's, I guess, where the beauty of the probably Zscaler acquisition is how that can sort of shift out now as a complementary component of, the broader Zscaler suite of products.
We are able to eliminate your NAC, your firewall, simplify your switching infrastructure. I mean, theory, because everybody's in a network of one, what is the switch worth? It's a patch panel. So we have customers that are saying, I have $70 million of switch refresh coming up. Can I cut the cost? I said, you can easily go to half of that, because your switch doesn't need to be intelligent anymore. And there are CapEx advantages because you can buy a white box switch from Taiwan. And there are OpEx advantages as well. If there's no complexity, there is nobody to manage it. At Airgap, we used to have this every Friday. We used to have this competition where people would, spilling the beans here, after 6 o'clock, people would have a couple of beer and they'd go into the lab. We had a lab in our own office, and they would randomly switch cables. And the goal was, when you come back to your desk, everything should be working. So somebody's doing a streaming session, somebody's opened up RDP session, and everything would work even when you are changing the cables. I mean, that kind of flexibility is, never heard of.
Yeah,
people love that. So that's what we are super excited about.
Yeah, and I guess there's lots of solutions that probably you leverage stuff like 802.1x to try to do, this is this type of a device, or this is a user in this group, I'm going to drop them into this network or that network, and you kind of do away with all of that, don't you? Plus, personally, I've never found 802.1x the friendliest solution of them all. So it kind of allows you to flatten out your network in a lot of ways, because that concept of the network at one.
Well, I used to say this is probably something that will resonate with you, Jeremy, and your audience. When we are working from home, and in COVID, we all did, there is no firewall, there is no NAC, there is no nothing. And it works perfectly fine. People were more productive, apparently, arguably, during COVID than they are otherwise. Now, the reason for that is because everybody's in a separate network. You're in a home network, I'm in my home network. So the enterprises didn't care. They didn't need to deploy firewall in each of the network or NAC in each of the network. And the technology stack worked fine. But when you come back to work, because you are in a shared network, all of these extra redundancy is necessary. With Airgap, since even when you come back to work, we keep you in a separate network as if you're working from home. So the tables have turned. There was a time when people used to ship expensive gears to users' homes, especially executives' home, to say, I want to make your home look like corporate enterprise.
Yep.
Now
I remember actually the first wave of SD-WAN equipment. One of the selling figures was often, well, we've got a device that can go into people's homes and connect you to your corporate network, or a Wi-Fi access point that will, form part of the SD-WAN.
That's right. And now we are saying, I'm going to make your office look like home. Instead of your home looking like office, I'm going to make it look like home. You see the switch? Because if you are in a separate network, as if you're working from home, I don't have to deal with two separate stacks of technology, one for remote worker, one from on-prem worker. So like remote worker they needed VPN in the past, but they didn't need firewall or a NAC. Office worker didn't need VPN, but they needed firewall and a NAC. So the
Yep.
IT team was always struggling to manage these two distinct technology stack that may not match with each other. With Airgap and Zscaler, now you have a unified stack across the board with the unified experience and the same outcome.
Yep. Now, we talked a little bit about the deployment and how easy that can be, and you can drop Airgap into a network and you can bring devices on and without breaking it. Now, I listened to you speak at Zenith Live a couple of months ago, and probably one of the things that struck me from that is you're actually you're a pragmatist and a realist, and the reason I've reached that conclusion is often with micro-segmentation, we see people wanting to effectively block everything, denial, and then create a specific rule set, where everything, you only whitelist stuff. Now, I think your advice was that's not how you should start, because that's very difficult. And actually, the way Airgap works is you can kind of put Airgap in, and then you can build up, both build up your sort of rule sets over time, but you've also got the concept of the ransomware kill switch. Do you want to just talk to us a little bit about, I guess, your advice of how you'd, if you put Airgap in, how do you not break everything by sort of stopping all traffic laterally moving? We know enterprise functions, enterprise networking, we've got lots of things that do need to talk to each other.
Yeah, look, all the tools, regardless of the vendor that you're choosing, will provide lots of capabilities. I think it's the practitioner or IT team that has to decide how they want to use a particular tool. And this is true for Airgap as well. My recommendation, having done segmentation for about 13 years of my career now, I would say most practical approach is not to try and boil the ocean by saying, I'm going to whitelist everything. So I'm going to first blacklist by default, and then I'm going to selectively whitelist. Now, that's a noble cause, and it may take you years to get there because many times you don't quite know what kind of east-west communication is necessary. This is overall a new field. But also, uh, I hate to say this, but some of the application builders, especially for east-west communication, they feel that they have the freedom to do whatever they want to do. So they open up new protocols. So you may be upgrading your Apple or whatever TV or something next week, and God knows what east-west protocols they open up that you don't even know, and it'll stop working if you stop it.
Yep.
Especially, this is true, especially for healthcare and manufacturing, where there are lots of these devices that require east-west communication, and there's a constant upgrades going on those. And we've had practical experience in dealing with many customers in this space, and they have vouched for it, saying, "Hey, whitelist is probably not the best way to go because these new protocols are coming up every day." What we recommend to customers is, look, 95% of the attack surface or attacks, if you go historically, say I want to go 20 years back and look at all the attacks that have happened historically and what kind of east-west communication that was exploited by the attackers, it falls down to probably top 20 or 25 network protocols. And we made a list of those. So RDP, for example, is responsible for 47% of the ransomware attacks to date. There is SMB, which is about 27 or 25%. There is Telnet, there is FTP, there is SSH, and so on and so forth. And these are not exclusive. So there are some RDP attacks, and then there is some SMB attacks on top of the RDP attacks, and so on and so forth. But we made a list of about 30 such protocols, and we give it to our customers and say, look, 99% of the time, you already know that you don't need any of these protocols. For example, like in Zscaler, I don't have any legitimate reason to RDP into my colleague's laptop who may be sitting next to me. So, or the only person who should be able to RDP into any of our laptops is the IT administrator and nobody else. In Airgap, it will take you less than a minute to write that policy globally. So Zscaler is a global company. There are other customers of ours that are deployed in 32 countries across the globe. So the IT team can write a global policy that other than IT administrative team, nobody else can do RDP. And now you're reducing that 47% of the attack surface down to almost zero, because the only person who can access is the IT team. Similar thing for SMB, similar thing for WMI. There is no reason for me to SMB into my colleague's laptop. That doesn't make sense. We may connect through an SMB portal, but that's the only portal that should have access. We've all lived through WannaCry. We know what SMB can do to your laptop. And there are many such things. There's some known vulnerabilities. There's some unknown vulnerabilities. So my recommendation to be practical is pick these 25, 30 protocols, block most of them, if not all of them, and you're 95%, arguably, you're 90% plus or 95% plus secure already compared to what you were day before yesterday when your Airgap was deployed. And then over a period of time, as you learn more, you may eventually get to that whitelist. But don't try to do that on day one because that project will never succeed.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so in addition to that, then if you do start observing, let's say you've done the 95%, you've got that, but you start to observe an attack or something that looks suspicious in your environment, you've got that ransomware kill switch that you can dial up as well, right?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, ransomware kill switch is extremely important. We have a couple of customers who actually ended up using it. Now they swear that this is the best thing since sliced of bread, and they'll never. I mean, they'll sing songs about Airgap if you talk to them. By the way, we have many customers before the acquisition, and now after acquisition, it's gone out of control. I mean, I'm not able to keep up. Honestly, it's a good problem to have, but I'm breaking apart. So we've hired like 48 people now on top of what Airgap was. Can you believe that? And they are complaining that they are not enough. So that tells you the amount of enthusiasm. But I diverged. The ransomware kill switch is again not. I won't take the credit for building it. Sorry, inventing it. A customer came to us and said, "Look, my threat posture changes by the hour. Every hour I get a new threat from SOC team, or my team says that maybe we have a problem with this particular site or this particular data center or this particular VPC or this particular sector of my network. I don't know how to deal with it. Our response is shut down that network or do further investigation to identify where the attack is coming from so we can shut down that device. Either of those two are not good answers. So the way we built Airgap ransomware kill switch based on their feedback was, instead of having one set of policies, why don't we give customers four set of policies? That is sort of in preparation or readiness for a ransomware attack, possibly. Now, four is for four different levels, much like your forest fire level or DEFCON level. So we color code them into green, yellow, orange, and red. Now, if you get to know that maybe you have ransomware in one of your, let's say, Singapore site, but it's a maybe, you saw one laptop with one file encrypted, doesn't mean definitive, but you're a sensitive customer, you want to be very careful about it. You may say, let's elevate our policies to yellow, and yellow may have more restriction. Or orange, if you saw half a dozen or so files in three different laptops being encrypted, now you're getting a little bit more nervous. You want to go to orange. Orange may mean shut down access from third party, shut down access to non-business critical functions like filing expense report, filing PTO, and so on and so forth, but keep the core business function running until I'm sure that there is a ransomware attack. And if I'm sure, then I want to immediately isolate my crown jewels. So my customer data or my sensitive data, my intellectual property, that may be the policy in the red bucket, which says no access to any of these devices from anybody because I'm dealing with ransomware. And so now I'm in a protection mode. All of this can be done within less than a minute or a few seconds, actually. Versus you sit down in a room, get the auditors to approve, get five different approvals. These policies can be pre-approved, and
Yep.
all you're deciding at that time is what color to pick, and that's about it.
So you build it into part of your incident response plan. Then at the time that you're actioning it, you can go, right, based on this behavior, pre-approved policies, I can move to this, turn it up, and you're immediately mitigating the potential of the attack. And then, of course, as you investigate a bit more, you can pretty quickly turn that back down if you determine there's no risk there.
Yeah, I think my recommendation to customers: best case, we will stop your ransomware attack. Worst case, we'll slow it down dramatically, buying you more time. That's the And that depends on how strict your policies are for the
Yes.
color codes.
Yep. Awesome. Now, one part of the Airgap solution that doesn't get talked about as much as the remote access. So I thought we'd very quickly touch on that, and then after that, I'm just keen to hear a little bit about the industries and customers that you're engaging with. So yeah, let's touch on the remote access portion, and then talk about some customers.
Yeah, we built something very unique at Airgap for remote access, knowing that our customer, and to be honest with you, our customers arm twisted us to build this. And the best thing they did for us, because now it's on fire. And this is the notion of disposable jump boxes. So, no, look, every enterprise worth its weight in salt has a jump box. Many of them have farms of jump boxes. We have customers that have 12,000 to 15,000 jump boxes.
Wow.
And I would say smaller customers have probably hundreds of jump boxes. And these jump boxes are typically built with Citrix, VMware, Microsoft, and Dell or HP hardware. And there are farms of this, so you need dedicated team, anywhere from 2 to 10 people who are managing this, patching it all the time. And they are also becoming attack surface because these are persistent VMs that are acting as jump boxes with multiple people logging into it. There's very little control on it. And many times you need some templatization of these jump boxes because you may be operating an old MRI machine that needs Firefox with Adobe Flash running on it. So now you have to spin up a jump box dedicated to that, and so on and so forth. So it becomes a nightmare for customers. Not to mention it's expensive, both capex and opex wise. So what Airgap did is built the notion of disposable jump box, meaning a jump box is spun up when you need it. Let's say Jeremy wants to log into this MRI machine. Jeremy is a contractor. He would go into the dashboard and click on that MRI machine icon, and it would, in the background, spin up a jump box that is customized for that MRI machine. So it may need Firefox, Adobe, Java version 7 or whatever, and it's only accessible to Jeremy. And Jeremy, that jump box has access to only the MRI machine that Jeremy clicked on it. So it's tightly controlled end to end, and it's templatized. No more help desk tickets saying I'm not able to access this machine because this template has all the necessary functions. And once you finish your job, you click the X button, you shut down your laptop, or you don't know you move your mouse for 15 minutes. That jump box is completely destroyed, forever gone. No attack surface, no IP address, no persistent threat. Next time you want to log in again, you click on the tile, a new version comes up, which is
Yeah.
pristine. Um, Customers are going crazy on this because, first of all, they have to maintain nothing. This is fully managed service from Zscaler. All they are doing is maintaining a connector, which makes an outbound connection from your corporate environment into Zscaler Cloud or Airgap Cloud. And once your job is done, that session is closed. So I think every customer I've spoken to that has managed jump boxes is super excited about this and wants to get started
I
like
mean,
promptly.
jump boxes are kind of a scary concept, aren't they? Because they're the bridge between a permissive network that users can get onto, potentially coming from the internet, and typically a highly restricted network. So kind of just being able to tear them down and not have them, to your point, I mean, there's a big cost saving when you are talking about, having lots of these, but there's also just the fact that that is such a critical attack surface and a join between, the highly secure and the least secure networks.
Yeah, we do complete session recording. I mean, all the standard stuff that you would expect from a privileged remote access solution is already built into Airgap. So you would get 4K recording, you can do, and it's segmented automatically. So jump boxes cannot talk to each other, and jump boxes are designed for single machine access.
Yeah.
So they can only talk to single machine. That way, you know that there is no way to bleed out of that.
So moving to customers, then you've mentioned a couple of times healthcare and some specific use cases there. I think you mentioned manufacturing as well. Airgaps clearly got a huge amount of interest. Which industries in particular? What kind of customer profile are you seeing really come to yourself now and say, Ritesh, Zscaler, we're keen to look at this as a solution for our network?
I mean, look, technology doesn't have any limitation. You can deploy Airgap in any IP network, so to speak, much like Zscaler corporate office here. So if customers are serious about zero trust, especially for the LAN side, then Airgap is the only game in town, as far as I know, that is reliable, scalable, and proven. But I would say that customers who are also compliance heavy, so we have hospitals now, healthcare facilities, cyber insurance companies have wisened up. They know that there are these vintage operating systems. The latest machine that you can buy from, let's say, the number one medical equipment manufacturer is Windows 2007 base. So in 2024, if you go ahead and buy a $2 million MRI machine from the biggest manufacturer, it'll be running 2007,
Wow.
which is not supported by Microsoft already. So companies have figured it out. They know that there are some Windows XP, Windows 2000 NT, and 2007 machines out there that are sitting ducks. An insurance company doesn't want to pay millions of dollars to recover potential impact on those machines. So what they're asking for is a way to secure them, or a proof that you are securing these machines and making sure that they don't impact other machines in the network. We've had customers who deployed Airgap and saved hundreds of thousands of dollars on cyber insurance. From not being able to get an insurance to be able to save money on insurance, you can imagine how happy they are. So that would be a good example. Manufacturing is suffering a lot because of the same problems, vintage operating system, and COVID ended up opening access to these factories that were traditionally locked down or air-gapped, so to speak, right? So now they can't go back to pre-COVID days because it's just hard now. So Airgap has been a super helpful solution for all of our customers. I mean, before acquisition, we had about 30 customers, many of them Fortune 500. Some of them are listed on our website. These are public references. If you talk to any of them, I don't even have to make an introduction. I mean, everybody's connected through LinkedIn these days. I guarantee you they'll sing songs about Airgap because we've been able to solve so much of their problems and simplify their network and eliminate some of the overlapping technologies. It's a win-win situation for everybody.
Fantastic. Um, any other thoughts to leave us with today, Ritesh?
I'm excited. I'm hoping that Airgap becomes a standard, much like we've seen it in telco and cloud builder world. I hope enterprises do modernize their network with Airgap. Super easy, takes less than an hour to deploy, almost always, and and it's the right thing to do as you go forward in the journey of zero trust. So I look forward to working with all your potential customers who are watching this.
Awesome. Hey, thanks again for joining us. I love hearing about the solution. And again, I kind of come back to just the fact that you've leveraged standard networking components and kind of done it in such a smart way. So yeah, thank you for your time, Ritesh. Really appreciate it, and look forward to our continued partnership.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure. Always love to speak to you, Jeremy.
Cool. Thank you.
Take care.